Everybody, how are you today? This is Jim from the Pain PT. Thanks for being here. I have another success story today. I'm really looking forward to this one from Julie Markowitz here on the line. Julie, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Jim.
Yeah, Julie and I, we know each other before. We've done some work together. Some of you out there may know her by name as well from her work in this field of TMS and PPD. So I'm really excited to have you on and share your personal story, and then we can dive into some of the work you're doing now. So I'm just gonna turn it over to you.
Sounds good. I feel like my mind body journey starts very, very early. So I had a couple autoimmune diseases as a toddler. So that sort of indicates to me that something was going on. They did resolve. And then I'd say in early childhood, like age 10-ish, I noticed that I was in physical pain all the time. And I started getting massages very early on. And my parents have been in physical pain for as long as I can remember. And eventually, what I realized was that I think that chronic pain comes from trauma, but that took me a very long time to get to that. So I'd say like my main story that I like to share is about my journey with pelvic pain, actually. So that started when I was 23, 24, I'd say. So I started having some pain in my abdomen, like my lower abs. So I didn't have like a lot of what people talk about early on, which is like vulvodynia and like pudendal neuralgia and stuff. That sort of came later. And so no one really knew what was wrong with me. I went to PT, and when I went to PT, the PT was kind of like, "Well, you have so many things wrong with you. I'm not really sure where to start." And he
That's a ringing endorsement for your recovery, right?
totally, I think it was really frustrating, right? Because it's like, okay, you have back pain, okay, you have pelvic pain, okay, you have neck pain. And so he was kind of overwhelmed. And I think that a lot of people that I saw in the helping profession were very overwhelmed by what I was bringing to them. And I think that's really common for these mind body issues because people are like, I'd say Western medicine is not well trained in this.
Mhm.
So then I started going to doctors, and that's where I think things started going downhill.
Yeah.
So I saw a sports medicine guy at HSS, and HSS is kind of a not great place to go, I'd say. For anyone who doesn't know, it's Hospital for Special Surgery in New York. And so he's diagnosed me with a sports hernia. And so I saw this sports hernia specialist in Philadelphia who generally treats professional athletes. And he did a surgery on me like the day before like the day after he looked at an MRI that he had a special MRI machine. So the surgery went really well.
So
And I felt
they actually saw a hernia there. So there was an actual tear there,
there
according
was
to
a
the MRI.
tear, there was a tear in my rectus abdominis, and
Yeah.
that was supposedly what was causing the pain. A couple of days later, I started having pain on the other side.
Wow.
And things just started, I really started spiraling, I'd say. So I started having that on my left rectus abdominis. I started having pain down my leg. I begged him to operate on the other side.
Even
I
though the
think
other side, they didn't see anything there.
correct. So he did it and things just got worse. So the pain started going down my leg. It was on my vulva. I thought I had pudendal neuralgia, was having these nerve pains. And basically, the pain was the only thing I could think about. And so then I just started seeing more doctors. So I did all the Eastern medicine, I did the Western medicine, I went to see hip surgeons. The hip surgeons were like, you have hip impingement, you have this, okay,
Mm.
here's why don't you go to a pain doctor. Pain doctor's like, you have nerve issues. And so what I realized after, right, is that they all diagnose based on their specialty.
Right.
And so that's the real danger of going to these specialists because most of them are not holistic.
Hmm. Yeah,
Um,
it's a good point.
right. And so I actually tell people all the time, like, if you can, don't go see a specialist. Um, I know that there's some cases where seeing a specialist is really important, but in these kind of weird nebulous situations, I think it's a bad idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I agree. Especially for these chronic conditions, not like an acute fracture or right. That's when they can come in handy. But yeah, these nebulous cases. Yeah. TMS cases, basically.
right, exactly. So I remember very vividly I was seeing this acupuncturist who was very frustrated with me, and he was said to me, usually these issues come from repressed anger.
Wow.
Uh, I was like, I'm not angry. Uh,
Yeah. This is before you had any word of Sarno or anything like that. This was like early days.
so he said to me, there's this doctor at NYU named John Sarno, and according to him, that's what causes these type of chronic issues. And
Wow.
I found that statement really hurtful because I heard, and I think a lot of people that you and I work with think I'm crazy. This is in my head.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the pain is very much not in your head. There is a physiological process happening. But if you're not well versed in this subject, I think you're going to hear something really negative.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, this, I thought about it for a long time, and I was seeing another PT who specialized in pelvic issues. And he kind of said to me after a while, Julie, there's nothing wrong with you physically. What's going on mentally? Like, do you hate
Mm.
your job? Do you not want to get married? Is it this? This is that? And then I immediately fired him.
You were very resistant to the idea at the time. What like well, like many people are, right? And like you said, it's a slap in the face to a lot of people when it's yeah, you were there yourself, so you know.
I really know. And that's why I think validating people, and I know you know this too, is so important.
Mhm.
Because I didn't feel that there was anyone in my life who validated the pain, at least in that at that point. And so eventually I ended up in a neurologist's office. And she said, there's nothing wrong with you neurologically. I think you should see a psychiatrist.
Okay, so you had three, now you had three things. So
And
this
I'm
time,
rocking my
how did you take this answer from her?
I think that was the worst one because I've been in therapy since I was a teenager, and
Mm.
I did have a psychiatrist. So I'm like, okay, she's really telling me I'm crazy.
Yeah.
Um,
Did you at that time you didn't see the connection though between the somatic symptoms and the psychology at that point? You thought they were two kind of separate things, or you just thought they were physical nature?
I think I was starting to internalize what this acupuncturist had said to me, and I actually started looking up TMS therapists, even though I hadn't read John Sarno. And um, the problem was that I called one of these therapists, and he wouldn't see me because he wanted me to be evaluated by a TMS person. And because I was seeing another doctor at NYU, they wouldn't let me see him.
Interesting.
Um, and that was really frustrating because
Yeah.
that was way before I eventually was taken on by a TMS therapist. And so I felt really helpless. And I think, again, like a lot of people who went through or going through what I went through feel like no one wants to help them.
Yeah. And
And
you
that
were at NYU too, which I want to point out that was where Dr. Sarno had worked right prior. So he saw it that department. There were some other doctors running his department.
Yeah, and that was I tried to get in with Dr. Rashbaum, who took over his practice. and he would not see me, or they wouldn't let him see me. Um,
Crazy.
so then I eventually found a nerve surgeon in Maryland. So I was living in New York City at the time, and I went to see him, and he was the first person that said, "Your pain is real."
Hmm.
And I think that was what changed everything for me. Um, because it was like exactly what I needed to hear.
Hmm.
And he's
He
like,
validated that the pain was real, but he also went further. What else did he say after that?
he said, "I'm not going to operate on you. I will do tests, and I want you to see a pain therapist."
Okay.
And so I said, "I have a therapist." And he said, "I want you to see someone so you can talk about the pain specifically." And that was when I found a TMS therapist.
Hmm.
And it was really life changing because this was the first time in therapy where things actually started to change for me.
Hmm.
So I had these realizations in that therapy like, wow, I really don't know myself. I don't know what I need. I do have these issues in my life that I feel really helpless and angry about. And that was when the pain started going away.
Hmm. How long did you do the TMS therapy for?
The pain went away within about 6 months, actually.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, and so, one thing I caution people about is that it takes time.
Yeah, of course. It's always like you hear it. You don't, every story is not like a broken bone. Yep, 12 weeks, 10 weeks, 8. No, right? It's not like we don't know. I don't know if you can. I can't predict how long it's going to take. But
I cannot predict how long it's going to take, and I don't like when people say, "Oh, it'll resolve in X amount of time." Because how could anyone predict that?
yeah, I agree. I tell people just drop, if you can drop the timeline out, just drop it completely if you're able to, or really extend it out. Like I even say, put like 2 years if you want to put a timeline. That way it's far enough in the future that you don't think about it basically.
Totally. And what happened was once the pelvic pain went away, I got really anxious because underneath this pain was horrible anxiety. And I started to realize that I didn't know myself at all because what
Hmm.
happened for me, and I think happens for a lot of people, was I became the pain,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it's like, who am I without this pain? I actually have no idea.
So pain became such a focus point for you that nothing else was there. And then when the pain went, all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, the anxiety kicked in. Yeah. And then at that point you were, how are you how are you feeling with that? I mean, the pain had gone, so you're probably happy about the pain, but now the anxiety's there.
I felt horrible. And I've heard people say this too, that like when the pain goes away and they start getting anxiety, like the anxiety is worse than the pain in certain ways.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I felt so anxious and freaked out all the time. And um I have to also back up and say I had a lot of mental health issues because of eventually what I realized, the trauma that I've been through. And so I had always been depressed, I had always been anxious, suicidal, had an eating disorder, you name it, I probably
Yeah.
had it. And so again, like I defined myself around all these problems that I had. And that was really awful because it's like, how could I let go of these problems if I don't have a sense of self outside of them?
Yeah. Right. That's all you knew. That was your existence.
Yeah. And it was like when I talked about myself, I would just talk to people about how miserable I was. And like, that's not a good way to walk through the world, right?
Yeah. But that's all you, like I said, that was your product of your experience. And yeah, so was that kind of a like a starting to get some aha moments or realizing. Yeah.
Yeah, I had this realization a couple years into this therapy that um I would define myself when I would write in a journal like I am bad, I am horrible, like I just these statements about me as a person versus I feel this way. And that was a really big awakening, right?
Mm. You were very attached to it, sounds like.
Exactly. And so then I started to be like, okay, like I'm things outside of these problems I have. And so this I was in business school by this point. I had had a job when I was in all this pain, and then the pain went away around when I started business school. And I started really defining myself outside of these problems. And I decided to go back to school to become a therapist because I wanted to help people with their physical pain. And so I went back to school after I finished my MBA.
Which is pretty impressive, by the way. So did you go right back to school or did you work for a while in business?
I actually took a year off and I volunteered and I worked on a clinical research project as a peer mentor to help girls with mental health problems.
Wow,
Um,
okay.
and that was really healing because it was sort of like my first step into working with people directly with mental health issues. And so I went to social work school after that. And what was really interesting about social work school was that was when I realized that I had complex PTSD, which for anyone listening who doesn't understand that, it means that it's like all these little traumas that add up to chronic stress. And so chronic stress is what causes all of these mind body issues.
Mm.
So again, like I didn't really know any of this at the time. So um what really contributed to how I think about myself now and how I work now is I took this course called Current Approaches to Trauma, and it was about somatic experiencing. And so at the time, I felt under threat all the time. So I didn't have this pain, and yet I felt terrified all the time. And I'm like, but I've done all this therapy. I don't understand. And then when I learned about the nervous system and chronic stress, it started to make sense to me.
Mhm.
So it was like, whoa, I've not, or I should say, talking about it without targeting what's going on physiologically is not going to resolve symptoms
Yeah.
completely.
Like two separate, there were two things. You had just been doing the talk portion, but not incorporating the body.
And
Yeah.
so I am amazing at being up here.
Yeah. Yeah. Aren't we all, or most of us?
I have a ton of insight about myself. And sometimes that does not translate into change
Mm.
because we have to change at a cellular level. And so I started working on my nervous system and I noticed these changes. And so I decided to get trained in somatic experiencing. I started regularly doing it on myself, and a lot of things started to change. My eating disorder went away. I didn't go to treatment for it. My depression got a lot better. My anxiety got better. And it's because I started to feel safer in my body.
Yeah.
I should also say, like, one of the symptoms that came with complex PTSD for me is dissociation. And so the dissociation caused me to feel separate from my body. And so when I started doing the somatic experiencing, I was like, oh, I have a body.
Right. You were so far out of your body, you didn't know your body. Yeah, well, that's pretty common, right? I mean, I feel like I was like that too when I started meditating, years ago. It was really
Right.
hard to go into the body and stay in the body.
Totally. And I think that's part of the reason why I discovered that I was so disconnected from my body was because I started a very intensive meditation practice as well. And so all of this stuff would come up and it would be really overwhelming because I had no capacity to be with feelings.
Mm, hmm. Yeah. Yep. And that's what it's about, right? In the body. So
Mm-hmm.
things were, so when you were starting to like do that meditation, you were getting strong feelings coming up. Were you getting a lot of somatic stuff or just emotional type feelings or both?
I think both. Um, I was just so disconnected that I wouldn't have even been able to tell you what was going on,
You
if
went to
that
dissociation mostly.
makes sense.
Yeah. And for the audience, what was that like for you personally to go into that state? What does that feel like? Did that feel like for you when you were in that state?
Complete overwhelm. Um, and so in therapy terms, we call that flooding. And so what we have to work to really overcome a lot of this stuff, and I don't mean just getting over the physical pain, because you can get over the physical pain without completely healing your nervous system. And healing the nervous system is a lifetime work, unfortunately. um, so yeah, it just, I had no capacity, so I wouldn't understand what was happening to me. And for most people that are dissociated, they just start getting triggered nonstop and they don't know what's going on. So being in the body itself, or even being with the breath, is a trigger.
Hmm. Hmm.
So one thing I try to do with people is I actually don't tell them to take deep breaths.
Yeah. I don't know if I ever told you this, but I was so, when I was doing my, breath work training years ago, I got so obsessed with the breath that I was like, I'm going to monitor every single breath I take. And there was a period of time I pretty much did that. And I was totally over breathing. I was breathing way too much until someone pointed out to me, Jim, why you look like your shoulders up here. What are you doing? I go, I'm breathing. No, stop doing that. Oh
Totally.
yeah, you can get too far down that whole rabbit hole.
And actually, for people who are severely dissociated, the breath can feel triggering
Mm.
because their breath is so stuck that it's like, oh my God, why, like, I can't even do this.
Right. You can't force it. That's the thing. If you try, it makes it worse, right? It's yeah.
Hmm. Yep. So in somatic experiencing, one thing that we look for is a spontaneous breath.
Mm,
That indicates more safety, actually, and
yeah.
presence versus trying to force it.
Yeah, I like that too. I teach that too. The breath will come naturally when you relax.
Right. But you also can't tell people to relax.
No. If it was that easy, it'd be like, all right, you relax. Oh, look at that nice breath you got.
I
No,
know.
but maybe share with the audience what are some of the things. I mean, it helped you, and then it's helpful in your clients now through the somatic experiencing practice.
Hmm. Well, what did you say? What's helped
Yeah,
what?
what like you're leading off of what you just said about you can't just tell someone to relax. What are some of the things that you found helpful for yourself and other people to learn to relax and feel safe in yourself?
So it's really looking for things that are neutral or safe in your environment and trying to stay away from the body when you first start with that kind of stuff. So it's like looking around and being like, okay, like this particular painting in my environment feels really nice to me, and taking that in and noticing what that's like inside. And for some people, that does take them into their body. For other people, it just might be like, oh, I have an image of being at the beach or whatever. And it's just really trying to embody. And embodiment doesn't necessarily mean in your body sensations. It's like a internal experience instead of being like totally in your head.
Yeah.
And so that's called resourcing. And we really try to work on resourcing because the bad sensations are in our body are trauma related. So that's one thing. Another thing is just really trying to get present because again, like these bad symptoms that we're having mean that we're not present. So it's like how I'm distracting myself with obsessing about this symptom versus channeling safety, which safety for some people, for most people, is in the present. For some people, their current situation is not safe. But I'd say for the majority, it's like, okay, like I'm in my room, everything's okay. Let me update my brain and nervous system to right now.
Yeah. Okay. So, like in the current moment, um, sensation, stimulus, something that's more neutral, something that's more calming. And what would you say about people who have such strong like hypervigilance? You know, they tend to just they're always on their symptom. They're in their body, but not in a good way. And they have a hard time getting to something neutral.
So with that, it involves really just coming back as much as possible. I work with people like this all the time because, and I was like this myself. So I would just go negative immediately. And so it's like every time we notice that, it's like, okay, let me go to something neutral because a lot of people can't even go positive.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, this is not scary. And it's going to take a lot of reps of that,
Yeah,
right?
I'm so important you said that. I want to like do a little ding right here, a highlight, right? A lot of reps. I think that's so important. People think, oh, I'm doing that, but it's not working. Well, how long have you been doing it for? Like once a day for like a week?
I will tell you, Jim, that to get to a point of not feeling unsafe in my room, and this is just my room, my bedroom, it took probably 6 months of somatic experiencing every week.
Yeah.
Um, because it would be like I would look around and I'd be like, okay, that's nice. But then I would have a negative reaction to it, like just saying it was like, oh, okay, I like this painting. Oh no, here's this trauma response that comes up to the painting. And it would be like everything in my environment would.
Mm,
And
yeah.
so when we have this kind of hypervigilance, it's like that is going to happen to people, right? It's totally normal because we're so dysregulated and heightened that that makes sense, right? It's so unsafe. Our body is so unsafe that it's like, okay, of course that's going to happen.
Yeah. Right.
So
It's so automated and automatic. It just happens so fast. And you speak of the learning it needs to take place for to settle down that system. It takes repetition and time. And eventually the system, right, does calm down.
yeah, and I have to do this every day. It's like, Julie, okay, nothing bad is happening. Like,
Yeah.
and I've been doing this for years now.
But
And
just speaks to the power of the pattern, right? And the innateness of it. And who knows how deep that is in you, right? I mean, you mentioned having your own trauma, but that could be intergenerational for all you know.
it is.
It is,
So,
yeah.
right, like my parents gave me their trauma because they didn't know that they needed to work on it. So we pass that down unless we become the cycle stoppers, which I'm happy to say I feel like I'm a cycle stopper.
Hmm.
Which is like a serious burden, right?
But also a huge deal. I mean, like it's a celebration of that too, that you are doing that hard work to change, to stop the trauma cycle.
Totally. And the other thing, and you and I have talked about this, like for people out there, you're not gonna not ever have symptoms.
Mm. Yeah. Hate to break the news. I mean, I've had a couple of people say, I'm 100% cured. I said, yes, you are, but maybe talk to me maybe in 5 years and see if there's any other. You're gonna have some, that's being alive, right? And yeah, you could be triggered at any time. I mean, I get symptoms,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
It's normal. But
Um, I had something happen this year that was shocking. So, back in February, I found a bald spot and I completely freaked out and my family freaked out. My parents have dealt with hair loss, both of them, and we had no idea what it was. And a doctor friend of mine was like, I think it's alopecia areata. And I was like, what's that? Have you heard of it?
yeah, is that I've heard of that. There's different kinds, right? Um, I don't know. There's different, I know there's different parts to your scalp.
So this one is an autoimmune condition.
Hmm.
So when I went to a dermatologist, she was like, did you have COVID? I was like, no, I didn't have COVID. Well, you need to be really zen, Julie. That's how you make it go away. And I was like, well, telling me that is gonna make me not zen. Um,
It's
she
like
was
telling somebody to relax, right?
Yeah, and so what was really good about it was because of the knowledge I have now, and I did get really activated, of course, because I was like, what is this? Is it going to keep falling out? And every time I saw a hair fall out, I would be like, oh my God, it's getting worse. But the way they treat it medically is with steroid injections. Usually it takes a really long time for it to regrow and you need lots of injections. But because of my knowledge, I was like, I'm going through a lot of stress. I had just gotten engaged. I was having some like just general life issues, life changes. I think probably the engagement, as amazing as it was like super stressful because that these life changes
Mhm.
generally trigger symptoms. And so I'm just like, okay, like it's all right, Julie, like this is another symptom. And what was crazy was when I went back to see her, she was like, your hair's growing back.
Wow.
Of course it
Incredible.
is, because most people don't realize that it's stress based, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I was not Zen, Jim. I was
No,
definitely.
but you made the connection, right? And you were probably dealing with your emotions and managing the stresses. Yeah, and you weren't freaking out about it anymore, too. So you removed that piece.
I calmed down. I did have my fiance check my bald spot like every day. um, but
Reassurance.
reassurance. And she did say to me, the dermatologist, like, well, if you don't have some underlying autoimmune condition, which I don't believe you have, then like it's not going to keep falling out. You're not going to get other spots, and it didn't. And eventually I got more relaxed about it because when
Yeah,
we stop freaking out about a symptom, it gets better, right?
absolutely. Yeah, that's always the first thing I tell people. That's the simplest. Just remove that secondary reaction of fear.
Mhm.
Um, can go a long way.
And you and I have talked about this when we did our course. It's like all about trying to channel safety.
Yeah.
And so it's hard. It's really hard.
It is hard. It is. But like you're living testament to this couple of these experiences and how things can shift, go one way, but then come back the other way.
Totally. And that's why the symptoms generally don't freak me out that much anymore. Because it's just like, okay, this is here, this is annoying. And if we can just say it's annoying versus dangerous, then it goes away faster.
Yeah. And you're acknowledging your emotions too, because it is annoying. You are annoyed by it. So at some basic level here, and right, and you're not in fear, and you're like, okay, I like that. Okay. You kind of have that acceptance and
Yeah.
more relaxation into it.
And I'm a very anxious, hyper vigilant person still. Like, I'm not super calm, but I think that it's just like I keep working on it. Um, I'm aware. I generally can be like, okay, like this thing is triggering for me. That might trigger some kind of symptom. Okay, it's fine. But I do also want to say my pelvic pain is gone. Well, it's
Yeah.
been gone for years because I don't care anymore.
Yeah. So that symptom, so you maybe talk about that because that symptom's gone, but you've had other things that have popped up that are a little bit different. And that's usually what happens, right? It's like once you've become comfortable with one thing, it's got to find something else,
Mhm.
a new outlet.
And the other thing is, it's like if you go to a doctor and they have some weird nebulous diagnosis, it usually means that it's a mind body issue. And it's frustrating to people who go to doctors because they're like, well, what am I supposed to do about this? Right. And it's like, well, you're going to have to go a different route. You're going to have to work on your emotional life. And I think that that's really hard for people because the whole reason why this happens is because we're disconnected from our emotions generally.
Yeah. Yeah. They're too uncomfortable, too dangerous, too. And it's an unconscious process, right, of the system going. Like your system went into dissociation. It's not like you chose that consciously. That's
Mm-mm.
what's fascinating about it. It's like you don't have necessarily control over that in the beginning. It just goes there.
So I guess back to my journey, what was also interesting was each stage of my professional life, my own recovery kind of led to different healing modalities. So then I discovered internal family systems therapy, and specifically the work of Dr. Janita Fisher, who specializes in trauma dissociation. And she has this model that when we have complex trauma, our brain fragments into these different trauma responses. So it's like we have a part of us that is a flight part, a fight part, a submit part, an attach part. Um, did I miss fight part? That's really funny. Like anger. I think I missed
No, I think you said that. We said flight, fight, flight. Yeah.
freeze. I missed
Freeze.
freeze.
Freeze, yeah.
So freeze is the kind of dissociative part. And so when I read her book, Healing the Fragmented Selves of Trauma Survivors, it's like, that's me. And her model takes into account that and the nervous system. So I got interested in her work, and I actually started training with her specifically, and everything kind of made sense. And so now as a therapist, I use her work, I use somatic experiencing, and I still do incorporate Dr. Sarno's work, because I do think what he said about repressed feelings, repressed anger specifically, is really important. I don't think that I've ever worked with a client who has TMS that is not repressing anger.
Yeah. Maybe let's highlight that for a moment, because I think when the people I see with anger, again, that emotion in particular is like the last emotion people want to go to. I mean, whether it just be talking about it or feeling it, or and it is kind of like Sarno said, a hidden, and it's very sneaky, right? It comes out in different ways, and yeah. So I agree with you about that with the anger.
And also grief.
Yeah.
Uh, so I think that in our society, we have a very specific way of defining grief, which is like someone dies. And for people who have complex trauma, that's not necessarily the case. And for everyone, it's not the case. But I'm specifically focusing on complex trauma. Um, when we have this kind of abuse, neglect, whatever happened, there's trauma associated with what happened, and there's trauma associated with what didn't happen.
Mm.
So if you didn't have that loving, supportive environment, there's a loss of that. And we sometimes, I think we think that like if we didn't have it, we didn't know it. And that's not true. Innately, all humans need this loving support from others, and relationships are the most healing things in our lives. And so we have to grieve those losses. And I think those losses all live in our bodies. And that's really hard to access too.
Yeah. 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 Those two emotions, right? The anger and the grief. Yeah, I agree. I agree. So though all the work you've done, you feel like now, you're working with people, those tools you have, or those practices are really helpful in helping people to move forward.
I do think that the best way we can help people is by healing ourselves. And I don't think that we can help people go further than we've gone. And so a huge part of my life is my own healing process. And to some points, it gets a little obsessive. And I've really tried to dial back. And what's really amazing in my life right now is that I do activities outside of my own therapy and work.
Yay.
Yay.
Fun stuff.
Right. Like I moved here, as you know, in 2019 from New York, and it took me until 2022 to really start building a life here. Like I had my boyfriend and now fiance eventually, but I remember there was something he said once that really triggered me. He said that I really needed a friend in San Diego.
Hmm.
And I was like, I have problems making friends.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
and so eventually, after I kind of calmed down about that, because one of the things that I did, I had a lot of trouble with because of everything in my life was really, I was afraid of people. And I think that's really common for people with kind of the background that I have, is like, how do I find people that are not going to harm me, or at least intentionally harm me, or even unintentionally harm me, but like have really good intentions and are supportive. And so I started doing improv here, and I'd done improv in New York.
Oh, cool. I didn't know that about you.
Yeah. And so when I started improv here, I got really lucky because this group of people that I started with are like so loving and supportive, um and every teacher that we've had subsequently after our first class was like, you guys just love each other.
Hmm.
um and so improv has become a really safe space for me. Like, it's a place I go every week, and I have friends there and they really like me, and so I have that. I started a yoga practice, which can be construed as a healing practice, but for me it's really, I go out into the community, I
Right.
really focus on myself. And it's been really great for this embodiment stuff because I'm finally learning how to use my body properly.
Hmm.
um, which is really amazing because I was so disconnected for so long that it feels really satisfying to be like, oh, okay, I can do this thing now, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a different, you actually feel, you literally feel different inside yourself now, more connected, more settled. Yeah.
Yeah. But when I started the yoga, it was interesting because I was so frustrated. I would feel so dysregulated and I would get so mad because you're like, yoga's so calming. And I'd be like, it's not calming for me.
Like,
um,
I want to go smash things right now here in the yoga class.
I did. And
Don't
I
let down my
remember
dogs.
exactly. I did. That's exactly how I felt, Jim. I was like, I want to smash things. I don't want to be here.
Mm.
And eventually something really settled, and I'm not totally sure what it was, but I think it was like really getting in my body more because at that point I was really in my head and I would get really angry. The whole class, I would just obsess about being angry about something. And now I find it so regulating. Like, it was kind of funny. I said to my fiance this morning, it's like, oh, the hard teacher's teaching tonight, and I'm really looking forward to it because I think I'm going to feel really regulated after. Um, and it's really nice to be able to say that.
Yeah.
You
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you kind of worked through that. There's that emotion of anger and let it settle out, got in your body. You relaxed into it. Yeah. It's fantastic. It's so good. So good.
And
I'm
even
glad you're getting involved. You've connected because I remember we first touched base when you first moved out here, and it is hard to move across the country where you don't really know anybody. It's not easy to get started, but like you said, you've done this successfully now, and
yeah.
with all the challenges and made a lot of progress in yourself. Now we're helping other people, so it's pretty awesome to see.
And also, to add to your point about moving across the country, I moved right before lockdown. Uh,
Mm. Yeah, even worse, right? So you no chance to really meet anybody.
no chance to meet anyone except on Zoom. And I actually created this lovely community for myself, including you on Zoom. And that sort of sparked my ability to start meeting people in person, which was nice. And to add to this, now working on not focusing on healing all the time, one of the things that I've really been working on the past couple months is my golf swing.
Okay. Cool. Another thing I didn't know about Julie, golfing, improv and golf. Wow, that's cool.
Um, and it again, there's this satisfaction I feel with the golf swing, which is actually different than yoga, where someone's instructing me specifically on how to use my body and it's making sense.
Mm. So you're connecting, you're able to connect with what they're saying and feel your body, yeah, move in the right way. That's
So I
cool.
have to say, when I went yesterday, I got very frustrated because I was not using my body great. But I think a part of this, all of this healing is like tolerating the frustration of having setbacks or just the difficulty of getting to a better place because it is really hard. Like learning a new skill is really hard.
Yeah.
And I all want it to be like now.
Yeah, golf is not known to be easy.
No, it's definitely not easy. Um, and I have to be patient with myself as I've learned to be patient with myself and my healing, which I think was the biggest hurdle I've had to overcome is like, this is really never going to end. And there's actually a grief to that too, because I think that we all want to get to a place of being finished and
Yeah.
like, I'm 100% healed from whatever it is. Um, and it sucks.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like a part of you wants to just move on with your life, which you are doing, by the way, right? With all these other things, but there's you still have to attend to these other parts and pieces.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we get to live while we're doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it. That's the platform we're in to for change, I guess, right? Is continued change. And yeah, I mean, it speaks to also, like you said, the power of our brains, the unconscious is so powerful and the programs are so strong that it does take a lot of time. But I think like you're seeing further and further changes right in yourself as you keep doing the work.
Yeah, and I think that it can just keep getting better the more work we do. I think I never thought that I'd get to a place where I would have this full life of having really supportive people because I think that that's the biggest change I've had in my life of having support rather than abuse.
Mm,
Um, I was really attracted to abuse in the past, and the life I have now are filled with people who are just on my side.
mm,
That's really hard for people with complex trauma because I think generally we are attracted to people who are traumatizing, right? And
yeah,
so the more we heal ourselves, our nervous systems, we start to be attracted to something else that actually is conducive to a healing process.
yeah.
Um, and that's pretty awesome.
And that's what's happening for you just by sharing those things I didn't know about you that you've gone back to and or enjoying so much. That is so cool. So I know we got to finish up here in a bit. Maybe share with the audience. Are you seeing TMS people? If people want to work with you, are you seeing TMS? Let people know what you're doing now with your work.
Yep. So right now I have a private practice, psychotherapy. I also do pain coaching. So as I said before, I mix in somatic experiencing. Um, I specialize in trauma and dissociation as well, and a little bit of the actual TMS work. You can look me up. My website's juliemarkowitz.therapy.com. I
I'll
have
put
an
it also in the notes too, in the after the interview on the YouTube channel.
cool. And my Instagram is Julie_Markowitz_therapy. And I guess that's it, unless you think I need to incorporate anything else.
No, I think that's it. I mean, it's like you said, your work you do now with people is born out of obviously your trainings, but like I think what you said was so important is born out of your own transformation and your own growth. It's so powerful when you can speak from that experience, of being there and going through this. So I think that's awesome. And I always love that because I feel like that really helps a lot people to trust in you and develop that relationship. So
Thanks.
really cool. And it's good to catch up again. I know we haven't spoken in a while, so I'm glad you wanted to come back and chat and share your story. And I learned a couple of new things about you today. So
Yeah, cool.
cool. Awesome. Well, good to catch up, Julie. and we will talk to you down. I'm sure I'll talk to you down the road a bit.